Hello, I'm Dr. Adrien Hannus, Professor of Anthropology and Director of the Archeology Laboratory at Augustana University in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. This museum module deals with what we have entitled Capturing the Feature. The technique of recording archaeological features has been greatly enhanced by being able to make molds of and then plastic resin casts of some of the surfaces that in the past we would have just had no way of getting an accurate recordation of beyond photographs and drawings. So in this case, we're experimenting with a new technique which will allow us to actually take the feature and save it for posterity. The application of silicone rubber mold over part of the floor surface and then casting it in a plastic resin gives us a unique advantage. And one of the interesting things about the current silicone rubbers that are now available is that you can actually lift part of the surface soils and retain those in the final display, meaning that you no longer are altering the colors and so on that once we would have had to tint. We're literally collecting part of the material. The feature we're collecting today is part of a interior surface, the floor surface of a prehistoric earth lodge that burned about 1,000 years ago. It's located at the Mitchell Prehistoric Indian Village, and excavations have been going on continuously for about the last 15 years. We just recently came down on this burned corner of a lodge, which shows us an interesting situation where a series of tools, which are bison scapula hoes, were apparently stored in the corner of the lodge, and when the lodge burned, these were incinerated. So once we would make this mold and then we'll excavate down through this surface, of course the pieces will not be able to be retained because they're so badly charred. This is the feature that contains the 5 burned scapula inside the burned corner of the lodge that we are going to make a mold and then a cast of. Here Rick Haugen is beginning to mix the tin-cured silicone rubber that'll be used for the mold. So Rick is beginning to apply the silicone rubber to the surface that is, in other words, the rubber is creating the mold that we'll be making the cast from. This shows about a half, actually, of the mold as the application of the silicone rubber is being applied. In this shot, Rick has just about completed the first application of the silicone material. This is the completed first coat of the silicone material to the feature. The next step after the first coat was completed was to apply a series of what we call buttons of silicone, which become the mechanism for locking the mold into the protective jacket. Also, we're going to cast into the jacket 2 pieces of steel rebar just to reinforce the plaster backing. Here Rick is preparing the plaster, casting plaster, and also you see in the foreground the jute cordage fibers that'll be mixed with the plaster to reinforce it. We then now have half of the plaster backing completed over the top of the silicone mold. In this slide, Rick is just removing the portion of the plaster backing that has cured, getting ready to make the second half of the plaster backing for the mold. In this slide, Rick now is beginning to peel the hardened mold off of the feature itself. Here you see the mold about half removed as it's being pulled up from the surface. And here we have the completed mold removed from the feature itself. So you can see the detail. For instance, in the upper left of this photo, you can see that it's pulled up the matrix of the baked daub and the other soil from the surface. Well, Rick, since the first part of this production is a series of still photos, because we didn't have a camera available at the time we were doing this, I thought it would be interesting just to review a little bit of what we're doing. The idea is that as you work archaeologically and you come on what we will call a feature, which is something that is defined as being sort of transitory in nature. In other words, once it's excavated, it disappears. So in the archaeological situation we normally are working in, we're forced to both photograph these things extensively, make a plan view map of them, and then take accurate measurements. But what we're trying to do here is add one more dimension to it by actually literally capturing it. So the material that we use to make the original mold is a silicone rubber.
Correct. It is a tin-cured silicone rubber that is a 10-to-1 ratio mixed with the catalyst that caused that to cure into a hardened rubber. So when we initially mix it up, it's very fluid. And in the case of this, usually I would be brushing it onto the model that I'm taking a mold of. But in the case of this feature, it was very fragile with the dirt and bone pieces and such things. We just poured it over, and it flowed out and picked up very excellent detail.
Well, yeah, the detail in this mold looks fantastic. And
yeah.
So what we had was a lodge area, a corner of a lodge here at the Mitchell site that had burned during the prehistoric period. And apparently inside the lodge itself, right in the corner of the lodge, they had stored a series of tools, including a series of these bison scapula hoes, which then were completely incinerated. And we've also captured some of the burn zone itself, some of the daub off the wall of the lodge as the lodge wall collapsed. So I guess what we're going to do now is you're going to be applying a plastic resin to
Correct.
this.
Yes.
And then we'll try to lift the entire thing, and hopefully that will bring with it, when we do the casting, the soil itself, in the sense that then I won't have to tint it or color it. It'll give us the accurate coloration. If that works as it has worked in a past project, it really gives us a way of literally capturing the feature, which adds a very valuable dimension to the archaeological process, because then we can actually display that for visitors to see in the future. Otherwise, we'd only be able to display photographs and so on. So I guess if we can go ahead then and put on the resin, we'll see how it works.
Okay, this is a urethane casting resin. It's a two-part. It's a 1-to-1 by weight, and so I shake up each half. Before I'm mixing them, and I should have I'll use an imaginary line on there. This was the part A, that's the resin. This is the part B, this is the catalyst that cures it. Now I'm adding the catalyst in equal parts. And then I'll just mix it for a couple of minutes to make sure it's mixed thoroughly. And I'm just going to carefully try to pour it over areas and then control a little bit with the brush.
One of the things that we found out that was really very amazing to me when we first tried to test this technique was that we're actually able to lift, both with the mold and then with the resin, the actual sediments, so that, because any of these displays that we create, of course, we would want to have to be absolutely as accurate in color as possible. And it turns out that, not that I could not match, for instance, this daub showing the burned aspect of it, but having the actual daub in the resin itself makes a much more accurate depiction of the surface that we're trying to copy. So this process is one that there have been some variations over the years in taking, molds of vertical walls, for instance, in archaeological sites and so on. But I believe that we're doing something that is quite original here. And of course, the resins themselves over the last number of years have vastly improved in their quality, so that I think you've found, for instance, that you said this new resin is one that is a little bit more rigid.
More rigid than the resin I was using.
Yeah, so it's a situation where, but by being able to then capture a feature, I think that it adds a dimension of real, both originality but real accuracy to the recording that we're able to do. And at the Mitchell site, because this site is under long-term excavation, and we have the museum with the exhibits that depict the various stages of work, I think this is really an important addition to the archaeological data recording.
Okay, now we've finished that first print coat, so we'll be ready for the next step, adding the fiberglass. This is just a fiberglass mat. They use an auto body for auto body repair. Okay, I'm beginning the second coat of resin, and after which before it cures, I'll be adding the fiberglass mat to it, and then I'll be coating the top of that with more resin. I'm just gonna get a good coat over everything. Working it in to follow the contours is tricky.
Following the curing of the resin, we added a layer of expanding foam, and then on top of that we have placed this piece of rigid foam insulation board, which will form the base of the display. So then the next thing we need to do is just peel this out, take the plaster.
The piece, finished resin piece, out of the mold.
Well, so now that we've lifted it out of the plaster, what we'll do is flip this over. The next step is to peel back the mold, which will then expose our resin cast. You can already see that our final result is perfect because it picked up all of this actual daub. So all of this surface that we have here will not require any kind of additional work to tint it. The only thing that will have to be tinting is some of this material very lightly. So this is perfect. It's absolutely worked out beyond my expectations, at least. So you can clearly see that whenever we applied the resin to the mold, the resin has lifted a portion of the soil, and it lifted this entire area of burn zone of the daub So again, all that this is really going to require to finish the piece for exhibit will be to tint these scapula pieces, and in other words, which were charred. So I'll just be adding a darkening agent to this. But it's the detail in this is fantastic. I mean, you can absolutely see all the grass in the daub and so on. So it's that really is superb. Now you could make additional casts in this mold, except that if you did additional casts, you would have to start tinting them, because we pooled, the bulk of the daub out with this round. So it's wonderful, though, to be able to capture with such precision exactly what the feature before we excavated the area was represented. So this will make a beautiful display. All we have to do is trim the edges, and we'll be putting it on exhibit. So in closing, I believe that this new arena of mold making and casting is enhancing considerably the possibility for collecting features that otherwise would have been obliterated through the excavation process. We always need to remember that archaeological excavations destroy material as they are advancing. So these features, as we call them, are something that are lost once the area has been excavated, so that what we have remaining are some of the artifacts that were contained in the features. But in this case, we're able to show the exact context of the relationship of each artifact to another, and the soil circumstance, which in this case clearly shows that the surface was burned rather intensely during a fire that burned the corner of this earth lodge 1,000 years ago. Thank you very much for your attention.